So we're diving into ginseng today, lab-grown ginseng.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and we've got some interesting research papers to dig into.
Definitely.
Apparently, we can grow a ton of it in the lab, like way more than you can out in the
That's
wild.
incredibly efficient. We're talking maybe 300 plants in the time it takes to grow 30 the traditional way.
That's wild.
Less than a year versus 4 years. That's a game changer.
So ginseng, I know it's popular for like health and stuff, but why is it so hard to grow out in the wild?
Well, it's naturally scarce to begin with. And on top of that, its popularity, all those medicinal properties people are after, means it's super in demand.
Right, so everyone's after it, there's not a ton of it, and it takes forever to grow. Makes sense.
And that demand leads to overharvesting, which just compounds the problem.
Okay, yeah, I see the issue. But back to the lab thing. How do you even grow ginseng in a lab?
It's called tissue culture. Basically, you take a tiny piece of a ginseng plant.
Hold up, a tiny piece. Like, how tiny?
You're talking really small.
Okay,
So you take this tiny piece and you use it to grow a whole new plant.
so like a cutting or something?
It's similar to taking a cutting, but instead of sticking it in soil, we're using a controlled lab environment. And instead of it just growing as a root, first we encourage it to form something called a callus.
Callus. That sounds not very ginseng.
Yeah, it's not the roots you'd normally think of.
Yeah.
Callus is basically a mass of undifferentiated cells. Think of it like a clump of plant stem cells that hasn't decided what it wants to be yet.
So it's like potential ginseng.
Exactly. It's full of potential. And here's where it gets really cool. Scientists can actually direct that development using plant hormones.
Whoa, hold on. Plant hormones. Like we're giving these ginseng blobs steroids or something?
Kind of. It's like a chemical cocktail that tells the plant how to grow. By adjusting the types and amounts of certain hormones, they can make the callus develop roots or shoots.
So it's like a recipe, like 2 parts this hormone, a dash of that one, and boom, ginseng roots.
In a way, yeah. It's all about finding the right balance of hormones to guide the growth.
So what are these magical plant hormones and how do they work?
The big ones for ginseng are auxins and cytokinins. They're kind of like the yin and yang of plant development.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So auxins, they're usually involved in root development.
Makes sense, auxins, roots.
Right. And then you've got cytokinins, and those are all about the shoots.
So if you want more roots for your ginseng, you just crank up the auxins.
Well, you'd think so, right?
Hmm.
But it's not quite that straightforward.
Ah.
It's about finding the right balance. Too much of one hormone can actually hinder the growth instead of help of it.
A delicate dance of plant hormones.
Exactly. Now, for growing this ginseng callus, researchers have tried a couple of different methods. One is using a shaker table, which is pretty low tech.
Shaker table, like for mixing cocktails.
Pretty much. And the other method involves using a bioreactor, which is a lot more complex.
Okay, so fancy high-tech versus shaking things up a bit.
Exactly. And you'd think the high-tech option would be better, but not always the case. Turns out the simpler shaker table method actually worked better for ginseng.
Huh. You'd think high-tech would win every time. What was the problem with the bioreactor?
It seemed like it was just too much stress to the cells. Too intense.
Really? Too high-tech for its own good.
You got it. Sometimes simple is best.
Go figure. Okay, so we're shaking our ginseng callus, keeping things nice and simple. What else is on the menu for these little guys?
Well, get this. Researchers found something that could boost ginseng growth in the lab, and you're never going to believe what it is.
Okay, you know I love a good science mystery. Hit me with it.
Coconut water.
Wait, what? Coconut water? Like the kind you drink?
Yep, the very same. They add it to the growth media, and boom, ginseng grows like crazy.
No way. Seriously, what is it about coconut water? It's like magic ginseng juice or something.
It seems like it's a combination of things. It's got nutrients, vitamins, amino acids, even some plant hormones.
So it's like a superfood smoothie for ginseng cells.
Pretty much. But speaking of plant hormones, remember we were talking about those? How they control how the ginseng grows.
Yeah, the auxins and cytokinins. It's like a recipe for plant growth.
Right. Well, there's another one that's been suggested for ginseng micropropagation. Gibberellic acid. Or GA3 for short.
Okay, GA3. What's so special about this one?
Well, it's known for stimulating growth, especially in stems.
So are we adding that to the mix? Auxins, cytokinins, GA3?
Here's the thing. There's a protocol out there that mentions using GA3 for ginseng micropropagation, but no one's been able to independently verify it.
So nobody's replicated those results. Maybe they made a mistake.
It's possible. Or maybe they just really, really likes GA3. But either way, it highlights how important it is to have multiple studies backing up a finding.
Right, gotta be sure. Okay, but I have another question about this whole lab-grown ginseng thing. So we're talking about callus, roots, hormones. Can we grow a whole ginseng plant in the lab, like with leaves and everything?
We can. That's the whole goal. And the research shows it's definitely doable. We're talking complete plants, even with flowers.
Wow, lab-grown ginseng that blooms. That's amazing. But I gotta ask, is this lab-grown stuff as potent as wild ginseng? Does it have the same stuff that makes ginseng?
That's the million-dollar question right there. Because it's not enough to grow something that looks like ginseng, it needs to have the same medicinal
No
compounds.
way, those ginsenosides everyone's after.
Ugh.
So did the researchers figure that out? Can lab-grown ginseng deliver the goods?
Here's the thing. It does produce ginsenoside.
Okay, that's good, right? So we're good lab-grown ginseng for everybody.
Hold on, not so fast. It does have ginsenosides, but usually at lower levels than in wild ginseng.
Ah, so close. But hey, at least it's on the right track, right?
Exactly. It's a work in progress. Now that we know it's possible to produce those ginsenosides in lab-grown ginseng, we just need to figure out how to optimize those levels.
So back to the drawing board with those plant hormones, huh? Find the perfect combo for max ginsenoside power.
Exactly. And it's not just hormones. There are a lot of factors that can influence ginsenoside production. Light, temperature, nutrients, it's all connected.
So we're not just copying nature, we're like engineering it.
It's an interesting thought, right? Imagine fine-tuning the ginsenoside content for specific purposes for certain health benefits.
That's wild. Tailor-made ginseng. But okay, you mentioned this lab-grown ginseng could be huge for conservation. Are we talking about like replacing wild ginseng completely?
That's the big question, isn't it? If we can grow it reliably in the lab on a big enough scale, it could definitely take the pressure off those wild populations.
No more ripping up roots from the forest. Everybody wins.
In a perfect world, yeah. But there are always challenges, trade-offs.
Like what?
Well, for one, how will consumers react? Will people accept lab-grown ginseng as, the real deal?
Right, there's always that skepticism with new stuff, like, is it really ginseng if it's grown in a lab?
Exactly. So there needs to be a lot of transparency, a lot of education around it. Consumers need to understand how it's made, why it's a good alternative.
Show them the science.
Exactly. And then there's the economic side of things, too.
Yeah.
What happens to the people who rely on harvesting wild ginseng?
Oh, right, like their whole livelihood is based on this plant.
It's a big shift. So it's not just about the science. It's about the people and the economies that are impacted, too.
Right, it's complicated.
Definitely. But that's what makes this research so fascinating. It touches on so many different areas.
It's not just about plants in a petri dish. Okay, so for our listeners who've been with us on this deep dive, what's the takeaway here? What should they be thinking about?
I think the biggest thing is, this is just the beginning. Lab-grown ginseng have the potential to really change the game.
And not just for ginseng. Who knows what other plants we could be growing in the lab someday?
Exactly. It's an exciting time to be following this technology.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, keep your eyes peeled, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.